Section 3.
Section 3.
You did a good job on Section 2. You did a great job. Leave a comment or check it out. If you're watching this individual clip, check that out from yesterday. And be sure to subscribe.
Yes.
So this was actually asked of us by a friend, Ken Chikowski.
Mm-hmm.
What's up, Ken? Ken joined us on Freeform Fridays.
Yes.
And so he wanted to know what the etiquette was for a jazz jam. He was at one. He had a bad experience. He felt like he was having a bad experience. He didn't know if he was out of line or what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And in the world of being a jazz musician, the jazz jam is the equivalent of the blues jam. You get the blues jams. The retired people, they have jams. The singer-songwriters, they call it open mic night.
Yes.
Right? So, and so do comedians. Hello, Studio Cat. And so, when you're doing these, they can be anywhere, right? You might have them at the jazz club.
Mm-hmm.
You might have them
in somebody's house or in a backyard or
a community center.
Mm-hmm.
Usually these are public performance, though.
Usually.
Rather
Not
than
always, but
rather than a house.
It depends.
Ours doesn't count. Ours isn't really... Freeform Fridays isn't really that. I mean, there's like the Jazz Outside series at Kenny Dorms, which is very similar. But that's... Ours is very, very... I produce that.
Ours is more cultivated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's produced, right? So I don't necessarily invite everybody.
Yeah. Although this time it felt like you did.
It was the biggest session yet. Be sure to check out the Jazz Destroyers. And it's part of the weekly series, Freeform Fridays. So you can just search hashtag Freeform Fridays on YouTube, and you'll see the whole series. I put it in all the tags so it shows up. Anyway, the Jazz Jam, basically usually the way, like in a lot of places, the way to get in with the jazz community, find where the gigs are, find guys to play with, do all this, you show to the jam.
Mm-hmm.
You find where the jam is, you go. Omaha's got one, Austin's got one, there's all of them, there's all kinds everywhere. They're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gathering. And usually there's somebody in charge. You want to basically not, unless there's almost always a house band.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to kind of lay back and figure out who's in charge before you go, like, maybe you put your instrument together, but you don't even warm up. You just put it together. Don't make noise.
Yeah, rule number 1 is don't piss off the person in charge.
Don't piss off the person in charge. Rule number 2 is make sure the person in charge knows that you're there, knows that you're interested in playing, and what you play, right?
Yes.
Probably not a great idea to go, oh, I play piano and drums and bass and guitar, whatever you want, right? Like,
pick your instrument.
Pick your instrument, tell him, and then let him figure that out over time that you can play other things. So let him know you're there. Let him know you're ready to play. Make sure you have your own copy of the real book. I would show everybody. My copy's on the floor right now, holding this microphone very tightly. It's a real book. Hal Leonard. No, I don't give a bleep. Hal Leonard publishes them, and it's a collection of well-known jazz standards.
Yes.
It's become kind of for lack of a better word, it's a bit of a standardized textbook into the history of jazz. It's certainly not complete.
No.
It's certainly not error-free. There's all sorts of mistakes. By the way, they put mistakes in there on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you record a version with that mistake in there, they can say, hey, you used the real book. You used our real book to make this work. You owe us a licensing for that. So they put mistakes in there. So it's very important to read it on the page, but then check it against the actual recording using your ears, right? So it's all about ears, and you got to check it. But show up with a copy. Probably have your own music stand,
Mm-hmm.
like a folding stand, something doesn't need to sit up on stage. If you're a guitarist, don't bring a large amplifier.
Mm-hmm.
Don't bring a loud amplifier if you can help it. The biggest I've seen at these jams, I saw a guy roll in with a Fender Deluxe reissue, the Deluxe Reverb reissue.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a blackface. Anyway, it's a 1x12, 22 watt. It's actually a pretty loud amp, but he was running it very quietly. So that's the other thing is like don't play. You want to make sure you can hear everybody around you. It's all about the blend.
Right.
So don't play too loudly, but don't play timidly either. But don't go overplay everybody around you. The next thing you want to know is you're going to be playing tunes out of a real book.
Mm-hmm.
Things you should know. Show up with 5 to 10 that you really know.
Mm-hmm.
And then be willing to read the rest, like be familiar with the rest, but really get to know 5 to 10 of them. Because if you're waiting for your turn to go basically try out for this guy who probably books that place,
Mm-hmm.
you want to make sure you're putting on your best foot forward. You don't want to be like, well, okay, I kind of know that one. Go in no 5
Mm-hmm.
and have 5 that you could showcase on demand. When it comes to soloing, it's usually two choruses unless it's an especially long form.
Mm-hmm.
But the best way to get a feel for how many choruses they like to do is don't be the first guy there and count them
Mm-hmm.
while they're warming up. Usually they have the house band will play the opening tune or the opening couple of tunes and count how many solos they're taking and then go do that number. So if they're doing 2, if they're doing 3, great. Do not get on stage without being invited. At a traditional jazz jam, when we do the jazz outside, it's like show up, plug in, hang out, right? Like if it's one of these where it's very improvisational and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's just making it up off the cuff, it's probably okay to just put your stuff up there and go.
Mm-hmm.
But feel it out. If somebody's in charge, honor that.
Right.
Because honestly, they're probably getting paid a very small fee. They're probably getting paid just enough to make them show up and do it, but not enough to live on.
Yeah. No, you end up there's
You're talking about like $60 for the
Right.
night. Don't mess with them.
And-
They're just there trying to make a few bucks.
and there is a difference between a structured jam and a free jam too.
Yes,
So-
and so structured. I'm really talking about structured jams.
Sure.
Free jams, it's make space. Don't overplay.
Uh-huh.
Right? When you're in a free situation, it's really about make your statement, and then way back down. If there's a groove going, sink into the groove, find your spot in there, and then step into the spotlight when it's time and when it's not. Don't hog the spotlight. You make your statement and you keep going.
Yeah.
That's the big one. That's the big cardinal sin I see at these free jams a lot is overplaying. I've walked off of stages because I'm going, there's no room for Don up here, man. Have fun. Like if you're a hot shot soloist, everybody else would like their opportunity to do that. And if you're assuming that everybody around you is there to support you and what you have to say artistically, you are mistaken. Right?
You won't make a lot of friends that way.
You won't make many friends at all. And so that's what the free. The big one is you should always, if there's a tip jar, always contribute. Right? You're talking about somebody who's either doing it for free or maybe they're getting paid $60. Like it's not, nobody does this for the money, and they got to put up with, for every guy who goes in and behaves themselves, right? There's, for every 100 guys, basically every night at one of these, I used to run an open mic. At every time you do one, there's going to be one person who's just obnoxious. And because of negativity bias, it seems like it's 10% of the people come through, but it's like one guy a night, maybe 2. And you just have to figure out how to, but they're going through there's a little, you got to keep the show moving, you got to keep the band, you got to keep everybody playing. Not a lot of breaks, right? And if nobody wants to play, you're there playing all night and for like $60. It's a tough gig, but make sure you put something into the tip jar, especially if there's a house band. Make sure you buy something from the place. If you're at a bar or a restaurant, have a drink, have a meal, have a Coke if that's all you can afford. But, you know, they do those specifically to put bodies in that room. And I remember with the open mics, it was brutal on the wait staff, or the bar staff, right? Because it would be a bunch of guys sitting around waiting for their turn. So the other thing you don't want to do with a jazz jam is sit there and wait for your turn. Make sure the guy knows you're there. Make sure you're on the sign-up sheet. And make sure he knows that you'd like to play. But then don't sit there and wait your turn. Sit there and enjoy the music. Study what's going on. And actively participate. Don't sit there and chit-chat unless you're specifically, like, trying to find the right people to do a project. Or like I go to the jams. I get gigs, right? I would love to play Elephant Room, but it's not the highest priority on my list. Though I'll probably start going again.
Okay. Well, that's up to you.
Well, and it's just good. I need to work on tunes. You should always work on tunes. Because as a jazz musician, that's your bread and butter. And
yeah, no bride is going to hire you for her wedding band if all you do is freeform jazz.
Right. And not everybody's trying to do this for money.
True.
Right? So if you're not trying to do it for money, good. Right? But I will tell you this, those jazz jams, at least in Austin, that jam at Elephant Room, some of the baddest musicians I've ever seen come through there. And
bad as in bad or bad as in good?
Yes.
Okay.
It's usually both, right? And they're real good about figuring out who's not hanging and who is totally hanging. And they're not super encouraging to new people.
Right.
Right? But they don't, block you out, but they won't let you go bogart the stage.
No.
And I'm not a jerk, but I've totally let people bogart the stage, and it's like, that's fine. Like, use my real book. I'm hanging out for the night. But when I go, I'm specifically going to find people.
Yes.
I keep a whole Rolodex of players. And I rotate players in and out, and I've got, 3-4 bass players I can call at any time. I've got about 3, maybe 4 drummers I could roll in. Because these gigs, I just book the gigs and then I find the guys to come do the gigs with me. That's kind of how jazz works, being in a jazz band, or a combo anyway. We're just, it's like one guy's kind of doing it and everybody else is along for the ride. And then I keep note of who rolls me in on their gigs. But yeah, the whole thing on this is, it's just, you want to show up and be humble. Even if you know that you're the best player in that room, take your 2 choruses. You don't need to go rub everybody's nose in it.
Right.
And all you're doing at that point is practicing. If you're not the best player in the room, you're there to listen and get a lesson, right? And take something away from that. And yeah, just be sure to consider everybody involved in the process. Be considerate of the person running it. Be considerate of the other players. Be considerate of the place and the wait staff. And that's probably my. Did I miss anything? You used to hang out when I ran the open mic.
Occasionally, I would. Yeah, don't be a jerk.
Yeah, and be ready to read. You will read. And be ready to transpose if there's singers hanging around. Holy cow. I don't have My Funny Valentine memorized. I had to read it in a fourth away from whatever's in the book. I was basically sight reading it.
Yeah.
And I'm going, Oh,
Yeah.
I love it because they put you in these situations where you gotta really, it puts you right at the edge musically, and that's where I like to be.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's
No,
where
just,
magic happens.
don't be a jerk. Respect whatever the rules are. Whether it's an open mic or a jazz jam or
Right.
whatever it is, because
But the thing
even
is
even
it's
open mics have rules.
there's
So
rules, but the rules usually aren't posted. A lot of these are like implied niceties and things. Some of
it
the
depends.
open mics with the singers, they get with the
Yeah.
singer songwriters, they because there's such a range of stuff, the rules become pretty apparent pretty quick. Like, or they'll announce them right
Yeah,
at the beginning.
a lot of them will announce them right at the beginning. You either get 2 tunes or you get 10 minutes, and God help you if you go over that. Um, yeah, I've known some people that just aren't cool if you go over that. You will never be asked back ever, ever, if you go over that.
Yeah.
So,
And by the way, don't do open mics that go on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Thursday's almost forgivable, but no Friday, Saturday, Sunday open mics. Don't do them. Don't do them because all you're doing those are the worst kind of open mics.
yeah.
That's a place being very vulture-y, right?
Yeah, that's kind of place that's basically using you as free
It's free entertainment.
entertainment. Yeah.
And I will tell you this, no musician worth their salt is going to be there because they're all playing Friday, Saturday nights.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Sundays, like Sunday daytime, they do that traditional jazz jam over at Cap City. Though I can do that, but I don't like it.
Yeah. No,
But let it, go in, feel it all out,
Mm-hmm.
be flexible.
Yes.
That's the most important thing in a jazz jam is like, you might be playing with somebody who can barely play, or you might be playing with the baddest players you've ever met.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And just be flexible about it and be humble when, especially around the guys that are better than you, or at least, and especially the guys who you think you're as good as. Because I will tell you what, that is the room where those jazz jams is where guys go to shred,
Mm-hmm.
and it can get pretty intense and all that. But it's a room full of musicians. You're playing for musicians.
Right.
But there are guys who just really do eighth notes really, really well. All right. So, what's next?